Good morning. Well, we have a water-themed morning today because it's my pleasure to announce that we have Larry Berger, EVP and Chief Technical Officer at Ecolab. Today's keynote is very exciting. We're focusing on how technology, innovation, and connected systems can enhance sustainable development. As Chief Technical Officer, Larry is responsible for leading the global research, development, and engineering in the organization. Ecolab's approach to innovation focuses on combining a deep understanding of customer problems with technology leadership to deliver innovative systems and superior solutions around the areas of clean water, safe food, abundant energy, and healthy environments. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you.
So, Larry, could you please tell us briefly about Ecolab and what it actually does?
Glad to. So first, thank you for including us. We're enjoying participating in a conversation with an enlightened group of folks who care passionately about the same issues that we do, and more importantly, are prepared to take action to help advance the goals. So let me share a little bit about Ecolab. For those of you who don't know us, I promise by the end of the week you will. Okay, we are a lot of companies say we're one of the best known, least known companies. We sort of feel that way too. So maybe by show of hands, who knows of Ecolab? So about half of you, that's great. Many of you are customers, so thank you. Ecolab is the global leader in water, energy, and hygiene solutions. We operate in 170 countries. We're about a $14 billion company with 47,000 associates. And so yesterday we talked a little bit about purpose-driven. It's exciting to see that that language is really growing in the lexicon of how people talk about their companies. We have been purpose-driven for a long time. It comes naturally to us. We have a pretty ambitious goal. It's to make the world cleaner, safer, and healthier, and do so in a way that protects, people and vital resources. And maybe one other note about Ecolab is that we operate with a pretty unique model of technology and service. So we bring together solutions. So the face of Ecolab is really not a product, it's a person. He or she working in a partnership with a customer to drive optimization in their facility that's critical to their ongoing success. So it's a combination of world-class service and leading, industry-leading technology to bring solutions.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Larry. You mentioned technology there. So how is Ecolab using technology to drive the future of sustainable business and water management?
So great question. So I'd say first, technology has been part and parcel of Ecolab's history. We were founded in 1923, and so technology and service have been really the cornerstones of the way in which we go to market and our competitive advantage. Naturally, with the scarcity of water, we focused a lot of attention because water touches and transcends really almost all of our customer base. People in the production facilities, food service, food preparation, even hospitals, slew of manufacturing environments. So managing water is critical to ongoing operations. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've been doing increasingly is looking at trying to reuse water. And the process, so I think the first generation, second generation of solutions, people have found more efficient ways to use water, reduce the amount of water per cycle without as clear a path to trying to recycle and reuse water. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on, but that's a big opportunity for us. Mm-hmm. I'll give you one brief example in something called a cooling tower, which is ubiquitous in all manufacturing locations. It's used in refrigeration, and it's used in a lot of different applications that most of us are not aware of. We can recycle the water 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 times. Okay? And of course, the more you recycle water, the bigger the challenge. So a lot of technology and solutions that we've developed enable the reuse of water.
Excellent. And you mentioned sort of food safety and sort of public health earlier. What are you actually doing on that front of sort of food safety, for example?
So that's a great question. Food safety. So one of the things that we do, we serve the food industry across many parts of the value chain. We're upstream in agriculture and dairies, where there's a lot of protein and fluid milk being produced. We have hygiene solutions in restaurants. We sell solutions to, actually many of our customers are here in food and beverage production. So we touch the value chain in a lot of different ways. And part of what we try to do is bring hygiene solutions, comprehensive. It's often cleaning and sanitizing solutions to ensure that the right training, the right products, the right procedures are used at the right time. So I'll just give you one example of why that's such a challenge, as you could imagine, and that is to bring together the daily workflow with the way in which hygiene solutions are being used and administered. So without getting too technical, what you want is the synchronous use of product when it needs to be used. Well, frankly, without having a good view of workflow and data management and compliance in real time, it's almost impossible to see that. That's one advanced, like a navigation system, GPS. It's much better than a compass because it gives you what the traffic really is like on the road at the very point at which you're driving.
And on that note of looking at all that technology, I mean, what would you say is the role of connected technology in sustainable innovation?
So this is an area that we're really excited about because one of the things that we can look at, for example, are risks, okay? So food safety risk, Legionella risk, risk in hospitals, and we'll talk a little bit more about that too in terms of infections. But the idea is if you can map out standards of practice and then look at compliance to those standards in real time, what you're able to do is identify places and procedures where there's inherent risk. And so fundamentally we identify the risk points and then we put together a mitigation strategy in partnership with our customers. So trying to reduce, and I would say today if you look at the food safety outbreaks, particularly in the US, but more importantly across the globe, they're dramatically reduced to what they were even 10 years ago. And it's all these vectors around cross-contamination. They are very hard to see, they're problematic, they creep in, and frankly too, it's just the weakest link in the chain that causes the biggest problem. So we're working very closely with our customers to help them look at how they bring hygiene services and practices, all of which generally use a lot of water, to be able to manage that more prudently.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll touch on the customer angle a little bit later. In terms of sort of the hospitals and the public health aspects, can you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing there?
Yeah, so we talk about public health, and really what we mean is personal health, often in public spaces. So like hospitals, for example, and I'll bet many people in this room have been touched by this too, either directly or through friends and family members, something called healthcare acquired infections. Everyone heard of what that is? So a healthcare acquired infection, sometimes it's a hospital acquired infection, generally is something you contract while you're in a healthcare facility being treated for something completely different, okay? So the idea is you go into the hospital for one procedure and while you're there you're exposed and you get an infection. How prevalent is it? About 1.7 million HAIs were contracted last year, okay, just in the US alone. The probability of catching an HAI is something on the order of about 4% in the US. It's higher elsewhere. And in the US alone, it's about 100,000 deaths. So I think everyone knows hospitals tend to be very complex, fast-moving environments, lots of risk for cross-contamination, both to patients as well as to healthcare workers. And so it's also a place that unfortunately is not characterized by a lot of standard practices. The practices often are governed by the physician or a particular hospital. So trying to help drive more standardization in and around cleaning, sanitizing, disinfectants. And we treat all kinds of things from surfaces to hands to instruments to try to bring a comprehensive program and a comprehensive approach to trying to manage down the risk. And we track that, we track it across our network of partners, and we can see where and how the risks are outsized and where are the opportunities. So that's a big issue in hospitals now.
Excellent. And going back to the point around sort of the customers, how do you actually deliver specific outcomes to your customers, and what's the pathway for that?
So yeah, let me kind of describe a little bit what we do and how we operate. So we bring together, as I said, service and innovation. And so innovation for us are largely very customized, specific chemistries, often unique engineering and dispensing systems, and increasingly more data and automation tools. Okay, so we bring together the service and innovation model in and around problem solving. So our customers really care about food safety. They care that the chemicals are safe and can be handled appropriately, but what they really want to do is manage down their safety risk, okay? And so we bring together service and innovation, And increasingly with data now, we're able to monitor, processes in real time and be able to control and optimize. So for example, in a manufacturing facility, one of the things that we're able to do is look at a process in real time and control the optimization of the facility, the amount of water that's being used, driving uptime, driving quality, driving yield. So I want to just make a point, because I think it's one of the questions that always comes up is, how do you monetize saving water? Mm-hmm. This has been a big issue. It gets talked about all the time. We're certainly no strangers to that as well. And unfortunately, in many parts of the world, water is priced irrationally, right? Water is cheaper in the desert than it is in the Midwest part of the country. And of course, the reason is that water is subsidized. So often the savings of water don't present a robust enough business case to justify it. Everyone knows it's the right thing to do. People operate with a fear that the availability or the quantity or quality of the water won't be there when you need it. But in terms of justifying it, it gets to be very hard. One of the things we've tried to do is help customers see really what I'll call the true impact of water and water availability and water cost. And I'll just give you a couple examples, and it's true broadly that if you look at water, and our customers use what I would call expensive water, it's often heated, it's chilled, it's mechanically conveyed, it's filtered, it's chemically treated, and then needs to be disposed of. So when you look at the total cost of water, particularly heated and chilled water, you can more easily put together a business case, because one of our design mantras with our customers is no heated water, no chilled water down the drain. And so water, for the most part, like in the city of New York, you can buy water, let's say it's $1.50 or so for a cubic meter. That's about 250 gallons of water, plus or minus. To dispose of the water is 50 to 75% higher. In other municipalities, the ratio of wastewater to incoming water can be 2 or 3 or 4 times as expensive. So the true cost of water is often not evident when people are trying to put together a business case as to whether or not saving water makes sense. Mm-hmm. And thankfully for us, I think when we've worked with our customers and help elucidate really where the value, where the opportunity is, it generates a completely different conversation about the investment. And so, because water, particularly in a manufacturing environment, often is sort of like the blood in the plant, that when you're managing water, you're also managing more thoughtfully assets, yield, uptime, quality, and you can do more preventative maintenance. And so things of those sorts that really resonate with our customers, really capture the all-in cost of water.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. That's really interesting, Larry. Moving more towards the technology side of things, how do you actually see technology impacting the water agenda across the next sort of 5 years?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I would say that we've made, in some ways, far more progress in the past 5 years than I thought, and far less in other places, okay? So I think in the next 5 years, and having participated in these kinds of forums for some time now, it really is encouraging to see the conversation gets elevated, that it goes beyond simply a political debate and goes beyond kind of the more near-in conversations. But we are seeing companies now do planning in and around water availability. So I was talking to a colleague this morning and said, if you were going to build a manufacturing plant today, what would you look at? Any part of the world, you look at your raw material availability, you look at taxes, you look at labor, you look at the markets, et cetera. Increasingly, people are looking at water and the availability of water to really drive an investment decision. So one of the things that we get asked by all the time by our customers is help them understand where and how managing water can be done more economically viably, as well as it can be done in terms of a more thoughtful horizon in terms of risk reduction. So typically, if you're looking at water management in 1 year or 2 years, you come up, honestly, I think the wrong answer. If you're looking at 3 or 5 or 10-year planning horizon, you often come up with the right answer. And I think, as Nelson spoke about a little earlier today, is that people are connected through these aquifers, right? So what it is, people are drawing from these common basins. And it's okay that we each think independently we're doing a pretty good job, but imagine all of us in this room are somehow connected to a common basin, each of whom we're dependent upon our economic viability by the thoughtful and prudent use of everyone else in the room. Okay? Probably some of you think that wouldn't be such a great idea. So I think driving more transparency more accountability, is helping drive more thoughtful use. So we are really strong proponents of driving accountability and a more thoughtful way of managing water, I would say holistically. And I think that's where it'll go. I think companies that are drawing water from aquifers and disposing of water, it'll be less about public shaming and more about the leaders who are doing it in a thoughtful way, doing it around purpose, and equally importantly, frankly, from their shareholders' perspective, doing it in a way that's economically attractive. These will not be just do-good, feel-good projects. We've seen a lot of those too, and while we're appreciative of those kinds of projects, those at the end of the day will not carry, the torch forward. It really requires, economically viable projects. And the good part is, frankly, I think technology is making a lot of those options far more attractive than they were 5 years ago, and that's the trend we're on.
Excellent. So what sort of tips would you give to the audience members in the room if they were looking into technology for sustainability management?
So maybe a few things I would look at. One, I think it's important to look at, as we call out, really the total cost and the true cost of water to the economic viability of the business you're in and the viability of the suppliers with whom you work, okay? Really get a good, clear footing of that, because I would say on the quarter-to-quarter cadence, even on an annual rhythm, often that goes understated. Second, find ways to grow the business with less consumption, less per capita use of natural resources. I would say over the last 30 years, if the way companies have grown will be how we go forward the next 30 years, we will run out of, and I'll say it jokingly, we will run out of enough planet to do so. Because the consumption of the resources over the last 30 years is anything but sustainable. The demand on natural resources is not, going to carry us, the demand is going to outstrip the availability. So for example, by 2030, think about this, it's not that far into the distant future, you might quibble with the numbers a little bit. Dimensionally, I think it's right. The demand for clean water will be up by 40%. Demand for food up 35%, and the demand for energy up by 30%. Those are the three biggest users of water, right? I mean, so, industrial water, used in energy applications, agriculture, institutions. So you have these very heavy reliance on water. And fundamentally, if we don't find a more thoughtful way to grow and prosper, we're going to run out of those vital, resources.
Excellent. I think we have time for just about one question from the audience. Do we have any hands going? Yeah. Can we get a mic over here?
I can just talk loud.
Yep. Okay.
A little left over from Nelson's presentation, but some of us are old enough to remember when we didn't walk around with water. It wasn't a thing. And it's those of us, I think, who have grown up now or we became grown-ups, now we walk around with water, that are having the hardest time getting rid of the bottle. My kids who are 20, they don't carry bottles around. They have reusable bottles. How do we make the bottle an activist? How do we make it seem like, I can't believe you're walking around with that bottle? And how do you take it out of various parts of your business so that it's just you don't take a plastic bag at the grocery store anymore. You bring your bag. How do we change that dynamic? And is that a part of your?
It's not part of, I defer to Nelson and others who have more expertise in that area, but I do know the point you're making, because I think it is, ubiquitous today. People are always walking around with water, and it's water on demand, and so, but I do think it underscores the importance that, a glass of water, on the one hand, people think about it differently than the water that's used to grow their food, the water that's used to make silicon chips in their computers and their mobile phones, but water everywhere. And fundamentally, the way in which we thoughtfully manage it in the end will impact just about every one of those operations.
Excellent. I think we had a question over there.
It seems to me that I see your brand more and more visible these days, so congratulations to that. Are you on an acquisition strategy for growth?
It's a good question. So first, I appreciate your seeing us. And so I opened this session this morning by saying, once you start looking for Ecolab, you will see us. Our hygiene products are all over. Our service vehicles are on the road. So I encourage family members tell me that all the time. When they start looking for us, wow, we're everywhere. No, we are primarily, driving organic growth. We're about a $14 billion company. And we've pledged, externally, we've made commitments to be a $20 billion company by 2020. It'll be a combination of, a couple of thoughtful acquisitions. They look right and they fit our mission and our purpose, but we drive a lot of organic growth as well. That's kind of our ambition.
Excellent. And one more question.
How would you reconcile emergent planning for like 5 to 10 years, or maybe it's 10 or 20 years in advance? And how would you reconcile that with, say, an indigenous community who considers sustainability as planning for 7 generations?
Could you repeat that one into the mic?
Repeat it. So I'd love to hear you reconcile. You mentioned planning for 10 or 5 to 10 years, or even 10 to 20 years in advance on sustainable water use. So how would you reconcile an indigenous community's vision or perspective of sustainability as planning for 7 generations?
So I'm not sure they're at all incompatible. Actually, I agree with you. I mean, I think that people's right to water, and as you say, indigenous communities that have been in multiple generations really expect water. We, in fact, really support that view. What we try to get to, this idea of an investment horizon around water, is not to say that we'd expect to deplete the water in that timeline. It's for really people to think more thoughtfully about investing in water solutions. What we find, frankly, is often, I'll use the word careless or reckless, decisions around water management, because they tend to be near term. You can exploit aquifers and basins and dispose of a lot of water, and even if you're willing to tolerate the economic penalty, you're not confronted with the societal impact for generations down the pike. We are trying to help companies and individuals get to decision processes that look in a longer time horizon to build a more robust, a more thoughtful, a more strategic, and a more compelling business case that really helps protect those resources. I think a lot of the short-term decision making, frankly, leaves those projects wanting.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Larry.
Thank you.